Welcome back to the channel, Angry Bike Mechanic. Also, this is for Insight Bike Works, any of my customers who have recently gotten their DPX2 back, or any shock for that matter, rear shock, and need to put it back on the bike. There's a process to it. For this job, you're going to want your shock pump, the White Lightning Crystal Clear Grease, or some carbon-friendly grease. I use that because so many frames are made of carbon these days, and Loctite 248 or the Drip Style 242. So first off, I want to thank you for having me do service on your shocks. This goes out to a customer who found me through just a Google search on YouTube, and then my website, insightbike.com. And thank you very much for having me service this shock. This thing's getting ready to pack up and ship back to you. So I ship these back at roughly 50 psi in the main air chamber, and I do that to prevent any kind of mishap during shipping. The first connect to your shock pump that you'll have with this shock, it'll display probably 30 psi depending on your elevation. 50 psi detached here with the shock is 50 psi in the air can. As you attach your shock pump, some of the air pressure is let out until it hits the gauge on your shock pump, which is roughly 20 psi. On some of the larger shock pumps that look like a floor pump, you'll lose 50, 60 psi. So just keep that in mind as you attach your shock pump. When you're installing the shock on your bike, you need to be sure that all the hardware that has threads on it has some fresh Loctite. I use blue Loctite on all removable threads like this, and you'll see as I'm installing it on this Enduro, you might have to wipe off the old Loctite and just make sure that those threads are nice and clean. You may have to blast it with some air, especially on the female end, just to get some of that residue Loctite out. Apply some fresh blue Loctite. I use the chapstick style dispenser. I also have the little dropper dispenser. That works really well. And just get those on the threads and make sure that it doesn't go onto the smooth surface. The smooth surface of the bolt sits inside the shock mounting hardware. And if Loctite gets in there, it will expand and seize that bolt in place, and it's very difficult to remove, often requiring a hammer or doing some kind of press work on the bike. And your best bet is to install, I like the White Lightning Clear Grease on the smooth or bearing surfaces of the shock mounting hardware, so the bolt. And then on the threads, I make sure that that blue Loctite is not raised, it's seated in the troughs of the threads. Therefore, installing smoothly and properly and the way it's supposed to without contaminating the wrong surface. So make sure those are spec to torque. What that looks like a lot of time with these frame mounting hardware bolts is a little past snug. With the rear shock, a little past snug. Within 24 hours, that Loctite's going to have cured. It's not going anywhere. These shocks, and anything with the Evil or Debonair label, has to be filled at about 20 to 40 psi increments. And so what that looks like, after you've put that shock back on your bike, you inflate it at 40 psi at max, cycle the shock a few times until you hear the air exchange between the negative and positive chambers. And then you inflate as needed, 20 to 40 psi more, and then cycle it again, over and over until you reach the desired psi. So if you're running 165 psi roughly, you're going to cycle it 4 to 5 times during that inflation process. Just make sure you do it the right way. And if you have any questions, those of you who are customers, you have my phone number, feel free to give me a call. If you are looking to have your shock serviced, if you go to the About page on my channel, and you can get me that way, you can contact me that way. So for my existing customers, please, I would love to have you leave a review down below in the comment section, just so everybody else knows that this guy's for real and he does good work, which I really appreciate. So thank you so much for checking out the channel and checking out this install video.